I woke up and looked around me. I had no idea where I was. Actually, I had no idea who I was. I felt panic rising up inside of me and wanted to scream, but I managed to suppress it. The door opened and a man wearing a white coat came into the room. "Hello, Darren. How are you feeling?" I looked around me. There was no one else in the room, so he was obviously talking to me. Is that who I am? Am I Darren? Yes, you are. Can you remember anything at all? I shook my head. No, I don't. Where am I? You're in the hospital. You had a fall and banged your head. But before I go on, make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell to make sure you don't miss out on any more crazy stories. The doctor explained to me that I was suffering from amnesia because of the fall. It doesn't usually last forever. It might take you a few days or up to a few months to get your memory back. You just rest now. I'll get one of the nurses to bring you something to eat. I lay back in the bed. I tried to recall who I was, but it was no use. I couldn't remember anything. The door opened and a nurse came in. When she walked in, I noticed an old man staring through the open door at me. I wondered who he was. Maybe he was a member of my family. Is that man outside waiting to visit me? I asked the nurse. Oh, no, he isn't here for you, she said. Has anyone been to see me? I'm sorry, I haven't had anyone here asking about you. Maybe I didn't have any family, I thought. The nurse put down a tray of food in front of me and left the room. I looked at the food on the plate. I had no idea if I liked any of it or not. So I just tucked in. It didn't taste too bad, but that might have been because I was really hungry. I just finished my meal when the door opened again. I was expecting it to be the nurse coming to clear my plates, but a man came in. Hello, Darren, he said. You know me? Can you tell me anything about myself? I cannot remember anything. I can tell you everything you need to know. I thought he was going to tell me all about my life, but what he told me was even more shocking. You faked your own death to get a life insurance payout of $1 billion. What? Are you serious? That's insane. You agreed to pay me half the money. How do I know you're telling me the truth? The man pulled out a handwritten piece of paper and showed it to me. It was a contract between someone called Darren and someone called Mark, agreeing to pay $500 million to him. I'm Mark, he said, and this is a legally binding contract. I didn't have any other choice, so I agreed to pay him half of the money. He told me that he was going to take me to a house where I could hide out until it was safe for me to go out into the world again. You can't let anyone know you're alive, he said. If you do, you will lose all the money. It was about a week later when the doctors released me from the hospital. Mark drove me to the house I was going to stay at. It was an ordinary-looking house in a quiet suburb. You go and unpack your things while I make a cup of tea, Mark said. I went up to my room and put my bag inside. I could hear some children playing out in the street and a dog was barking loudly. Well, I guess this is gonna be my home for a while, I thought. I went downstairs and into the kitchen. Mark, can you tell me exactly what happened? How did I end up in the hospital? Mark told me that the day I faked my own death, I took a boat out on the lake. I told everyone that I was going fishing for the day. He said that we had hidden scuba diving gear in the boat, so once we got out to the middle of the lake, he said that I put on the gear and jumped over the side of the boat. I then swam to the shore and was going to make my way to the safe house, but I slipped and banged my head on a rock. I brought you to the hospital and you have been there ever since. I then reported you missing to the police. They went out to the boat and couldn't find any sign of you. They assumed that you had fallen off the boat and were presumed dead. It seemed a crazy idea to me, but it had obviously worked because the insurance company had paid the money into my bank account. Don't worry about your memory, said Mark. I'm sure you will be fine soon. I've got to go now, but I will bring you some supplies tomorrow. Mark left the house and I settled down in front of the television. I started watching a movie, but it wasn't long before my eyes were drooping. I switched the TV off and decided to have an early night. I sat bolt up in bed. The clock on the table said 2:37 a.m. Something had woken me up. I had been dreaming. I tried to recall the dream, but it was fading away. I felt sure I had been tied to a chair, but I couldn't remember anything else. In the morning, I thought about what had happened the night before. It was obviously just a dream, but at the time, it had felt so real. I didn't mention it to Mark when he came around. I was worried in case he told me I should go back to the hospital. A few days went by and then it happened again, but this time I wasn't sleeping. I was sitting in the kitchen when suddenly a vivid scene flashed through my mind. I was sitting on a chair and my hands were tied behind my back. I tried to remember more, but the memory vanished again. The flashbacks began to become more and more frequent. I could also remember more details. I was in a dark room, like a dungeon. It smelled cold and damp. Things just didn't add up. I was determined to get to the bottom of it. I decided that I was going to do some investigating into my disappearance to try to get some answers. I Googled my past life, and what I found was shocking. I had a wife. Why hadn't Mark told me I was married? I wondered. I made up my mind that I was going to find my wife. I knew it was a risk, that someone might recognize me and I would lose all the money. But I had to let her know that I was alive. I looked up the address where she was living and went straight there. I knocked on the door and waited. A blonde-haired woman opened the door. When she saw me, her face fell in shock. "Darren, you're alive," she said. I told her everything that had happened. "I have amnesia. I don't even remember your name," I said. "It's Donna. The police searched the lake and the surrounding areas, but there was no trace of you." I told her that Mark had helped me when I fell, that he had taken me to the hospital. "Who is Mark?" she asked. "I don't really know. He told me that he was my friend." "What does Mark look like?" I described Mark to her. "Wait a minute. I know exactly who that is, and his name isn't Mark. That is Billy, and he's your arch enemy." "Huh? Arch enemy?" "Billy has been out to get you ever since you graduated high school. I think he might be crazy. But he said that he helped me." "No, he would never help you. He hates you. He is definitely lying to you." I'm so confused. "I think that he was using you to get the money. I bet it was his idea all along." Donna thought that if we went back to the lake, to the boat, that it might help me remember what happened on that night. "We'll wait until the morning and go out there. Hopefully you will remember once we're there." The next morning, Donna drove me to the lake. As soon as I got out of the car, it felt familiar. We walked down to where all the boats were moored. "That's the boat. That's it," I said excitedly, pointing to a big blue and white boat. "Yes, it is. You remembered." We climbed onto the boat, and I sat down on the seat. I picked up the fishing rod and closed my eyes. As I did, pictures came flashing into my mind. I remembered that day so well. The sun was shining bright as I steered the boat out to the middle of the lake. I got out the fishing gear and set everything up. I hadn't been fishing for very long when I heard a noise behind me. It sounded like someone was climbing onto the boat. As I turned to see who it was Mark, or rather Billy. He lunged at me and knocked me to the floor. I tried to fight back, but when I had fallen, I hit my head on something. After that, everything went black. The next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital. Well, if it was Billy that attacked you, there's no way he would have been the one that took you to the hospital. I wonder who it could have been. I had no idea who it was that helped me as I was out cold. I sat there staring back to shore. That's when I saw him. It was the old man that I had seen in the hospital. He was standing on the shore and staring out at us on the boat. "Look," I said, "do you see that old man? I think he might know something about it. He came to the hospital when I woke up from my coma." We started the boat up and headed back to shore. As we got closer, the man walked up to meet us. "Do you know me?" I shouted. "Yes, Darren, I know you," he said. "I'm your friend, Terry." I didn't remember who he was, but I felt like I could trust him. "Was it you that took me to the hospital?" He nodded. "I was suspicious about his intentions. I was sure he was going to hurt you, so I followed you out here to keep an eye on you." He told me that Billy had taken me off the boat and driven me to an old dungeon. He had tied me to a chair and left me there. I waited until he left, and then I broke in and rescued you. "But how did you know he would try to hurt me?" "Of course I would know. I know everything about that boy. He is my son." I looked at him in shock. This was getting stranger and stranger. "So you're telling me that Billy is your son? Why didn't you tell me when you saw me at the hospital?" "I couldn't because my son would have ended up in prison. Please don't tell the police what he has done. I don't want to lose him." I felt really torn. On the one hand, I really wanted Billy to pay for what he had done to me. But I owed this man my life. I really didn't have the heart to let him down. "Okay, I won't say anything, but you have to promise me one thing." "Anything?" "You have to help me get my money back from Billy. He doesn't deserve his share after what he did to me." Terry agreed to help me. "How are we going to do this?" he asked. "I have the perfect plan." I told Terry to tell Billy that Donna was going out on the boat on her own. "You have to convince Billy that she's going to fake her own death, just the same as I did. I'm sure he will want to try to get her money too." "Okay, I should be able to do that." The next day, Donna took the boat out onto the lake. I hid in one of the rooms on board and watched as she sat down and gazed out across the lake. "Don't worry," I whispered. I'm here. I won't let anything happen to you." We only had to wait about 15 minutes before I could hear the sound of someone climbing onto the boat. I watched as I saw Billy creeping slowly across the deck towards Donna. He lifted up his arms and lunged at Donna, but she was prepared and dodged to the right. He fell, sprawling across the deck. I ran over and pushed him to the ground. "You're not going to get away with it this time. I know what you did that day. You have no proof." "Oh, yes, I do. I have secret cameras filming everything that's happened today. Once I show the footage to the police, they'll believe me when I tell them what you did to me that day." Billy's face fell. He knew that the game was up. "Give me back my money or I will tell the police and you will go to prison for a very long time." Billy paid me all of my money. Donna and I are still in hiding though. We can't risk anyone finding out that I'm actually still alive, or we will have to give the money back. What did you think of my story? Please comment your thoughts down below.
Men are trash, so at least get some trash with money. Don't date any guy who isn't rich.
My mom said for the millionth time as we ate our dinner one night, "Do you think that Dad is trash?" I asked. She laughed.
Oh, definitely.
Doesn't that make me half trash?
Anyway, back to my point, Linda. These boys are nothing but stress. All they're going to do is break your heart, lie to you, and make you cry. And like they say, it's way more comfortable crying in a Mercedes-Benz than it is on a bicycle. So make the right choices. I forbid you to bring any broke boys home. I want to know their parents' net worth, everything. Bonus points if they've already started their own business.
I'll continue my story right after you like, share, and subscribe to this channel. After that, please hit that notification bell to make sure you never miss out on any more totally insane stories. If you're new here, you don't know what you've been missing, and you certainly don't want to miss any more. Okay, back to my story. Since I understand words, this was the first thing that my mom preached to me. Normal moms would teach their daughters about self-confidence, honesty, and that kind of stuff. Not mine. She was all about ensuring that I did not end up with a broke man who would ruin my life. When I was old enough to understand what she was talking about, I told her that we should probably judge people based on their personalities and not how much money they had. But she wasn't hearing any of it. After my mother's persuasive conversation, I went to my room to get ready for school the next day. I had no idea it would have been the day which would have changed my life completely. It started out as a normal, sunny day. I sat through the most boring assembly ever, while our school's principal went on and on about how important it was for us to respect our elders. After that, my first class was art. I was sitting in front of my huge canvas, trying to understand the messy abstract piece I had painted, when I smelled someone next to me. Now, I know that sounds weird, to smell someone before seeing them, but the cologne smelled so strong and expensive, I wondered who it could be. I looked left, then right, then behind me, and there he was.
"Hey, I'm Roger. I'm new here,"
he said, while winking. I sized him up and down. He was dressed like your typical trust fund baby. Ralph Lauren polo shirt, shorts that said, "I'm too rich to care about fashion," and a pair of expensive boat shoes. He smelled divine.
"Your piece looks rather, interesting. What is it?"
I looked at my piece of art again, then looked back at him and laughed. I don't know either. He stayed with me during art class, and we had lunch together that afternoon. I didn't know why he chose to follow me around when there were many other gorgeous girls in my class. So, why did you move here?
"My dad is William Green, and he's the CEO of a huge investment firm. He had to move here because they're opening a new branch. I didn't really want to move, but my dad said we had to."
That night, I Googled William Green and the investment firm and found out that his dad was not a millionaire. He was a billionaire. So this guy had all the qualities my mom demanded, and she'd definitely be happy if I brought him home. Don't get ahead of yourself, girl. You don't even know if he likes you. You've only known him for one day. He could be a serial killer. Or worse, poor, I thought. The next day, he was waiting for me at the entrance of our school.
"Hey, Linda."
Wow, what a gentleman. A boy has never waited for me at school before, I thought, but instead I said, "Hi." He was wearing another expensive outfit, and his smile was brighter than the sun. We didn't have the same classes that morning, so he asked me to meet him at lunchtime. Later, we sat together eating cafeteria pizza and drinking chocolate milk.
So I got you a little something to thank you for welcoming me to this school. It isn't always easy to make a new friend so quickly, and well, I'd just like you to know I appreciate you.
He handed me a little gift bag from Tiffany's. I opened it, and it was a beautiful tennis bracelet worth at least $1,000. Oh my god! Roger, this is too expensive. I can't accept it.
It's nothing. Come on. Are you forgetting that I'm a billionaire?
You're not. Your dad is. Is he okay with you spending his money like this?
Let's just say my weekly allowance is really good. Don't think too much about it. Please accept my gift.
He smiled his charming smile. I was lost in his eyes for a few seconds. Then I snapped out of it and put the bracelet on my wrist. It was so shiny. Thank you, Roger. I appreciate it. By the next week, we decided to start dating. I didn't really have any other friends anyway, and neither did he. Almost every day, he'd give me little presents. Jewelry, perfume, clothes, hair accessories, and so much more. It reached a point where I had so much stuff, my mom began to ask questions.
Are you using my credit card without permission?
She asked one night. No, Mom. Why would you ask such a question?
Where are you getting all that expensive stuff? I know you can't afford it with the allowance I give you.
Okay, well, there's something I haven't told you. I have a boyfriend now. His name is Roger. He buys me this stuff.
Oh, wow. He must be rich then. He's rich, right?
I told her all about his billionaire father, and her eyes lit up.
Jackpot. So when am I going to meet him? Invite him over for dinner tomorrow night.
The next day, I told Roger that I told my mom I had a boyfriend and that she wanted to meet him. He looked a bit uncomfortable at first, but he agreed.
I just have something to do after school. After that, I'll call you and we can go to your house together.
I wondered what he had to do, but I decided not to be too inquisitive. I didn't want him to think I was controlling or anything like that. The night went well. My mom seemed to like Roger a lot. She asked him all sorts of questions and he seemed to have the right answers to everything. He was absolutely charming, and after he left, my mom was beaming.
His clothes are really expensive.
She started.
And he smells divine. I mean, if I was your age.
Mom, stop! I screamed, then laughed. So you're happy I'm making good choices, right?
Definitely. His father is a billionaire. It seems I've taught you well.
A few months went by, and we continued growing in our relationship. I learned almost everything about him, and every time I learned something new, I fell deeper and deeper in love. There was just one thing, though. He never invited me to his house. I didn't know where he lived, and I never met anyone in his family. I found it weird that I'd introduced him to my mom and welcomed him into my life with open arms, but he hadn't done the same for me. Was he ashamed of me or something? I confronted him about it at lunchtime one day. How come you've never introduced me to your parents?
Well, they're always busy. Most times I'm home alone. It's pretty lonely in that huge house all alone.
I'm sure they're home sometimes. We've been dating for months, and I've never even seen where you live.
I didn't know you felt that way.
I'm starting to think you're ashamed of me. He looked really sad for a moment, then said,
All right, how about this? You're coming to my house tomorrow after school. Even if no one is home, at least you'll know where I live. I'm sorry I made you feel that way.
The next day, he was nervous all day. After school, it almost seemed like he was trembling. Are you scared about something? Listen, we don't have to do this if you aren't ready.
I'm not scared, I'm just a bit, cold. Let's go. My dad's driver couldn't make it today though, so we'll have to take the bus. Is that okay?
Sure. We took about 3 buses, and then we had to walk about 10 minutes into a lane where it seemed that only really wealthy people lived. There were huge trees and houses with huge gardens which were widely spaced apart.
Here it is. Home, sweet home.
He said it like he was a bit uncertain of himself. I looked at the house, which was humongous and very modern.
Oh, we'll have to go in through the back door because I forgot my key. We usually keep the back door open because there's no crime around here.
I followed him, and we entered through the kitchen, which was half the size of my entire house. Whoa, somebody here really loves cooking, huh? He laughed and showed me around the house. My feet were hurting after. Where's your room? You didn't show me your room.
Oh, it's upstairs.
He led me to a big room upstairs. It looked almost like a hotel room. There were no posters and nothing in there that really expressed his personality. Then I looked on the wall and saw a picture in a frame. There was a middle-aged couple holding twins. Who were these people?
Oh, nobody. This picture was already in the room when we moved in.
I continued staring at the picture. Then I heard a car pull into the driveway. Looks like I'm finally going to get to meet one of your parents. He looked a bit uneasy, then took my hand and said,
Okay, here's the thing. I didn't tell my parents I'm having a girl over, and I'm not exactly allowed to date. If they find out you're here, I'll be grounded for like a year. We have to leave, now.
I followed him, and we left through the back door. We walked and took 3 buses back.
Hey, do you mind if I stay for dinner tonight?
No, I don't mind. You're always welcome. I smiled, but I thought he was acting really weird. After dinner, he left, and my mom continued to beam with pride.
I really like this one, honey.
Yeah, but something weird happened earlier. Oh, look, he forgot his phone. I noticed that his phone was on the chair where he had been sitting. It must have fallen out of his pocket.
Well, we'll just drive over there to bring it back to him. You do know where he lives, right?
We got into the car, and I gave her the directions. We pulled up in front of the huge house about 45 minutes later. All the lights were on, and there were 2 cars parked in the driveway. We got out of our car and knocked on their front door. A well-dressed woman answered.
Hi there. Can I help you?
Oh, you must be Roger's mom. We came to return his phone.
Roger? I think you have the wrong house, sweetie.
I peeked inside and looked around. This was definitely the house I was in earlier. Is anyone else home? I asked, thinking that maybe the lady was mad.
Harry, some crazy people are at the door.
She shouted inside. A man came immediately.
That's not William Green.
My mom said, confused.
My name is Harry, and this is my wife Cleo. Who are you looking for?
I'm looking for Roger, my boyfriend. He lives here.
No, he doesn't. You must have the wrong house.
At that moment, Roger's phone rang. I picked it up.
Hey man, where are you?
The voice on the other end said, Hey, I'm Roger's girlfriend and I have his phone. He forgot it. Can you tell me where I can bring it to him?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll send you the location right now. Check the messages.
He said and hung up. My mom and I walked to our car and followed the directions on the map the caller had sent. After a few minutes, we ended up in a place near a bridge. It was filled with homeless people. There were some tents and many cardboard boxes. Then I heard Roger's laugh. I was sure it was him. I walked over to a very big cardboard box. He was sitting in there with a middle-aged man. He saw me and stood up, startled.
What are you doing here?
The other man in the box said.
Who is this pretty girl, son?
That's your father? I thought you said your father was a billionaire named William Green. Tell me you all are just here feeding the poor.
My mom screamed. The man looked very hurt.
Linda, I'm sorry. I lied to you. This is where I really live, and that's my dad. The house I took you to earlier, well, I don't really know who lives there. I just walked around these neighborhoods for a few months, monitoring when people were and weren't home. I knew nobody would be there when we went.
So, where did you get all that money to buy all these expensive gifts you get me? And all these clothes? How do you do it all?
Well, there are some things I just can't tell you about yet, but I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me.
My mom was angrier than I was. She made a huge scene and then we left. I broke up with Roger, but not because my mom wanted me to. I continued to be his friend, because I really did like him, but I didn't want to be with a guy who would lie to me. Honesty means more to me than money. I'm so sorry, girls. Your grandfather passed away this morning.
My mom said with sadness in her eyes. Then she smiled.
Poppy, he left you his entire fortune. Do you know what that means? No, Mommy,
Poppy replied. She was only 8 years old and didn't really understand anything but dolls and whatever nonsense the kids were into those days. You're a billionaire,
A what?
she replied. I rolled my eyes. You know how some 8-year-old kids are smart? Well, my sister definitely wasn't one of those. Before I continue, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. You definitely won't regret it. Hit that notification bell to make sure you never miss out on any amazing stories. What do you mean he left his entire fortune to Poppy? I always knew that man was mad. But what does an 8-year-old know about money? Can she even use it before she turns 18? I asked.
There, Caroline. You sound a bit jealous. Well, to be honest, I'm jealous too. But according to his will, Poppy can get whatever she asks for.
My mom replied. We had been living a very ordinary life in the suburbs. My dad was an elementary school teacher and my mom was an interior decorator. My mom's parents were extremely wealthy, but when she met my dad, she decided that she was bored with all the glamour and just wanted a simple life. My dad didn't have much money, so a simple life is exactly what she got. My grandparents weren't too happy about the situation though, and they became very cold with my mom. My grandma died first and my grandpa a few years later. It was sad because he'd grown apart from his daughter. Then he died and left all of his money to Poppy. I thought that it must be a practical joke or a way for him to get revenge because it made no sense. We weren't talking about a few $100,000. We were talking billions here. Billions!
So what do you want to do with all your money first, honey?
My mom asked Poppy.
Toys! I want to buy lots of toys!
She squealed. Of course she does, I said while rolling my eyes. She left with my mom and returned about 3 hours later. I looked outside and saw a truck. Apparently, she'd bought almost everything in the toy store and my mom had let her. I ran downstairs and went outside to watch the truck driver unload the stuff. Mom, are you completely insane? Where is all of this stuff supposed to go? I asked.
Well, I was thinking we could use the living room, Poppy's room, and your room.
What had I done to the universe to deserve such a ridiculous punishment? I thought. So 3 weeks later, my bedroom was a playground. Sometimes I thought about setting Poppy's stuff on fire, but one afternoon after nearly tripping over a Lego and breaking my face, I got a bright idea. I ran downstairs to discuss with my mom. The billions belong to Poppy, right? But we can make our own money right now. How about making a YouTube channel and getting Poppy to review all these toys she bought?
What's a YouTube?
Never mind, Mom. I just need your permission. I'll do it all by myself, but the profits will belong to me.
Okay, honey.
I went to Poppy's room to tell her my idea. Hey, kiddo, you're rich now, but do you know what you're not?
What?
Famous. What's the point in having all this money and toys and nobody knows who you are? Do you want to be the most famous kid in the world?
That would be nice. How?
I explained my idea to her and she seemed excited. We went to the mall and bought loads of video making equipment. When we got home, we set up a little room where she could record her reviews. This went well at first. Poppy didn't gain popularity instantly, but I made sure I did whatever I could to market her channel. Before I knew it, I had lots of money saved, although it was still nothing compared to Poppy's fortune. Then, Poppy decided she wanted a new house and my parents took her to the wealthiest part of our state and let her choose it. It was a 5-floor mansion with 2 swimming pools, a tennis court, and a huge flower garden. She demanded that they repaint the house in unicorn colors, so pretty soon I found myself living in the most ridiculous-looking dollhouse in the country. At least I had my own room now, and it was not covered in toys. I was able to use money I earned from the channel to fill it with all the things I wanted. My parents had a huge housewarming party, and everyone was impressed.
Our daughter Poppy is famous, and her earnings paid for all of this.
My dad boasted. Dad, are you sure you're telling the truth? I asked, knowing very well that Poppy used her inheritance to buy the house.
Why would I lie to my friends?
My dad laughed uncomfortably.
We've raised such a smart daughter. She's a prodigy, actually. How does an 8-year-old get such a brilliant idea, begin reviewing toys, and then buy her parents a mansion? Hard work really pays off. Or maybe we just have excellent genes.
I was convinced my parents had gone mad. How could they let that silly 8-year-old take credit for my idea? Anyway, I didn't make a big issue because the quality of my life had improved a lot. But more and more, it seemed like I was becoming invisible to my parents. One evening at dinner, Poppy decided she wanted to drop out of school.
Mommy, Daddy, at the housewarming party, you said I was a prodigy. That means I'm super smart, right?
Prodigy. Ugh.
You're the smartest kid in the world. And you're rich and famous. You're the best daughter we could have ever asked for.
My mom said.
So, most people go to school so they can get jobs. But I already have a job making videos about toys. So why do I need to go to school? Plus, I'm already super smart.
You're 8 years old. You can't review toys forever. Do you know that many kids stop playing with toys eventually? I said.
Don't be so rude to your sister.
If you want to drop out of school, then sure. We'd have to hire someone to stay home with you, though. You're too young to be left unattended.
Can't you quit your job, Daddy?
Well, that's a good idea. But you'd have to pay me a salary.
In fact, my parents both laughed. But do you know what they did? They both quit their jobs. Then they hired 2 butlers and a maid. They convinced Poppy that it was necessary. So I lived with people who relaxed all day while I had to bust my brains at school trying to make sure I got into a good college. Of course I was annoyed. One afternoon, I was ranting to my best friend, Millie, after class. Can you believe after all my hard work, Poppy gets the credit? She would have never had that YouTube channel if it weren't for me.
Well, Caroline, you have some money saved up, don't you? Why don't you start your own channel, reviewing things that you actually want to review? Focus on yourself instead of her, and I'm sure things will work out.
Wow, you're a genius! I could start a hair and makeup channel. We could start it together. It'd be so much fun, I said.
Yeah, I'd love that. So just let her channel die out, or your parents can help her to run it, and focus on yours.
We went shopping that very afternoon. I bought a whole bunch of products I'd never imagined myself using, and we went to my house and set up the channel. I designed a whole section of my bedroom for my videos, then created the first one. We created a schedule. Monday was for lipstick, Tuesday for eyeshadow, Wednesday for concealers and foundations, Thursday for mascaras and eyeliners, and Friday for random hair products. We took Saturdays and Sundays off because we'd need a break. At first, our channel was extremely slow, but that's how everything is in the beginning. In 3 months, we went from 50 subscribers to 10,000. After 6 months, we had about 500,000 followers, and some of our videos had millions of views. Poppy couldn't keep up though, because I had begun to ignore her and my parents. I couldn't really stand them. My sister had competition from other kid toy reviewers, so she eventually faded into the background. I overheard her talking to my parents one night and cried because I was laughing so much.
Mommy, I don't like YouTube anymore. No one is watching my videos. Well, what do you want instead, honey? Can we get some animals? I want animals. Animals? What kind of animals? Monkeys, wolves, elephants? Those types. You mean the ones we find in a zoo? Zoo, Mommy! Let's get a zoo!
I rolled my eyes, went to my room, and went to sleep. The next day, I came home from school and there were wild animals all over the huge garden. They were harmless ones, though. No lions or tigers anywhere. I barged into the house and began screaming at my parents. How on earth could you let Poppy get all these animals? You never even let me have a kitten when I was her age, and now she has kangaroos and zebras? You have got to be the most insane parents in the universe.
But that's what she wanted. She's our baby girl, and she gets whatever she wants.
You know you could have let her buy the zoo instead of bringing the zoo home. Who is going to take care of the animals? It's going to stink here.
Poppy, don't listen to your awful sister. Let's go and play with the koalas.
My dad said as he picked her up and swung her around. I marched up to my room, opened the door, and there was a baby giraffe in my room. I've got to admit, it was cute. But then it pooped on the carpet, so I screamed at my parents again. But they didn't care. My billionaire sister got whatever she wanted. I tried to shut them all out again and focus on my own channel. Millie and I were able to get several contracts from popular makeup companies. So we had extra money, and we were trying to decide what to do with it all.
Maybe we should start our own makeup line. We could name it Caramilli, a blend of our names. That would be so cool.
You always have the most brilliant ideas. We skipped school for the next 2 weeks to work on our makeup line. My parents didn't notice because they were too preoccupied with their favorite child. We were able to hire a few people to help us along the way, and we knew we'd sell our stuff quickly because we had so many followers. But just when we were about to launch the product, Millie gave me some disturbing news.
We don't have any money left.
What do you mean? I gasped.
We didn't budget for this thing properly, and we've run out because we had to pay the workers. I think we've got to wait a while before launching.
Just then, my mom barged into my room looking half scared and excited.
Caroline, you'll never believe what happened.
Well, if it's about your dumb 8-year-old child, I'm not interested.
The lawyer called about Dad's will. Apparently, it was an older version, and they found his most recent will. He's left all his money to you, Caroline.
She squealed. So why did he write the first one and then change his mind? I asked in disbelief.
You know your grandpa was an alcoholic. He was probably drunk. Anyway, you're missing the main point, my dear, dear favorite daughter. You're rich.
I nearly fainted and Millie had to grab a chair and get me to sit.
Do you understand what this means?
Yes, we can continue with the launch.
Not just that. You can do absolutely anything you want.
I looked at my mom, who was still smiling. How much of the money has Poppy already spent?
Only a few million. There are still billions left. All for you, dear. What will you do first?
First, we continued with the launch of my makeup line. Then I made Poppy go back to school and I tried my best to ensure that she grew up like an ordinary child. I sent all the animals back to the zoo and donated most of her toys to charity. She didn't use most of them anyway. Happy days were over for that brat. I let my parents choose whether or not they wanted to go back to work, and they both did because they were getting bored at home. Oh, and I repainted the house. It's blue now, instead of those horrifying unicorn colors. I decided to stay in school because I believe that having a good education is important. I'm gonna go to college too, and I'll try to use my newfound fortune for good.
I opened my eyes and looked around me. I had no idea where I was or how I even got there. It took me a few seconds to realize I was in a hospital room. Suddenly, I sensed that I wasn't alone. I looked to my left and saw a man standing there looking at me. Who are you?
I'm your father.
What?
Oh yeah, and you're a billionaire too.
What? But before I go on, make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you do, you might become a millionaire just like me. I felt the cool water washing over my body. I wondered if I was dreaming, but as I opened my eyes, I realized that this was no dream. I sat up and looked around me. I was on a beach at the edge of the water, but I had no idea how I got there. In fact, I didn't even know who I was. I started to feel afraid, but I tried not to let the panic take hold of me. Some instinct told me that I needed to get up and make myself a place to shelter. I began to collect driftwood from the beach and dragged it up into a wooded area bordering the beach. I piled the pieces of wood together, along with branches and twigs that I found nearby. It didn't take me long before I had managed to build a reasonably secure place to sleep. I wondered if there was anyone else on the island. It didn't look as though it was inhabited, but I decided to take a look around. The island wasn't very big, and I managed to walk the whole way around it in an hour or so. I didn't see any sign of life. I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. Part of me was relieved that there wasn't some dangerous tribe living there. But when I realized that I was all alone on a deserted island, I began to feel really nervous. I decided that I should do something to keep myself busy. I had managed to build a shelter, so that was the first job done. The next thing I needed was something to eat. I looked around to see if there was anything I could use for a weapon. Hanging from a tree was a branch with a long pointed end. I pulled the branch down and snapped it from the tree. I picked up a stone and began filing away at the end until it was sharp. I can probably use that as a spear. I picked up the branch and made my way down to the water's edge. It was so clear I could see the big fish swimming around just below the surface. It took me a few tries, but eventually I managed to spear a fish. I went back up to my shelter and looked around to see if I could find anything else to eat. I saw a tree which was full of bananas and some leafy plant that looked a lot like spinach. I had all that I needed to make a decent meal. I made a fire and began to cook the fish. Day after day went by. My routine never changed. I would wake up, find food, cook it, eat it, and sleep. But one day, as I was making my way down to the water to catch a fish, I heard the distant sound of an engine. I looked up into the sky, squinting in the bright sunlight. There was definitely something in the distance, and it was headed this way. I quickly ran back up to my shelter and picked up the branches that I had prepared earlier. I laid them out on the sand until they spelled out the word help. The plane was almost overhead now. I began waving my arms and shouting as loud as I could. My heart was beating so fast I could hardly breathe. Please let them see me, please. But the plane just carried on. My heart sank, and I was just about to give up hope when I noticed the plane began to make a turn to the left. It came around in a circle and started descending. Yes, they've seen my sign. They're coming to get me. The pilot landed the plane and I went rushing over. Thank you for coming back.
Get in. You're safe now.
I climbed into the plane and lay down, but the exhaustion mixed with the relief of being rescued got the better of me. I passed out. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital room. I looked up and saw a man beside my bed. He looked kind of familiar, but I couldn't place him. "Who are you?" The man told me that he was my father. That came as a bit of a shock, but what was even more startling was that he told me I was the son of a billionaire. I couldn't believe what he was saying. I was rich, not just well off. I was really, really rich. What happened to me?
We're not really sure. A few weeks ago, you went for a drive around the country, but you never returned. We had no idea what happened to you.
So I've been missing all that time?
Yes, to be honest, we feared the worst. But thankfully you are safe. We're just so glad to have you home in one piece.
A few days later, the doctors said that I was able to go home. The man who was my father came to collect me and drove me home. I felt a bit weird driving along with him. He was my father, but it felt as though I was with a complete stranger. Eventually, we pulled up outside a huge mansion. Is this my house?
Yes, it is. Don't you recognize it?
I shook my head. No, there's nothing familiar about this place. The doctor had said that moving home might trigger some memories for me, but I didn't recall anything about my home. I had to be shown where my bedroom was, and the kitchen, bathroom, etc. When we sat down for dinner that evening, my family started bombarding me with questions about where I had been for the few weeks I was missing.
What happened on your drive?
Where did you go?
Have you any idea how you ended up on that island?
I'm sorry, I can't answer any of your questions. I don't remember anything at all. But that wasn't strictly true. I did have one memory, but I didn't reveal it then. Half because I wasn't really sure if it was real, but also because I just had a gut feeling that I shouldn't tell them. The memory I had was of a woman. I couldn't see her face, but she was wearing a necklace in the shape of a bird. I had no idea who the woman was, but whenever I thought of that memory, I felt safe and secure. It felt strange living back at home. For my family, life just went back to normal. But for me, it just felt really uncomfortable. They felt very different to me. It didn't take me very long to realize that my family was actually crazy. They threw lavish parties every night. Our house was always full of celebrities. They spent an obscene amount of money, and to be honest, I wasn't really sure that I liked that kind of lifestyle. Something made me doubt that I enjoyed living that kind of life. I thought that maybe I should get in touch with my friends. Perhaps if I met up with them, I would find out more about the real me. Father, I think it's time I met up with my friends, but I don't remember who they are.
To be honest, you never really had any friends. You were always just happy being here with your family.
It made me sad when I heard what he had to say. Surely, I must have at least one friend.
No, honestly, I can't think of a single one.
Another thing I didn't really like about my family, they treated the staff like slaves.
Fetch me a drink of water. Now. Come on, hurry up. What are you waiting for?
They spoke to them terribly, always bossing them around and never saying thank you. I felt really embarrassed when I saw how pompous and snobby they were. One night I was having trouble sleeping. My family were all fast asleep in bed, so I decided to go for a walk around the house. As I was walking along the hallway, I stopped in front of a huge family portrait hanging on the wall. I was looking at each family member, trying to recall anything about them, when suddenly I noticed something really odd about it. It looked like it had been photoshopped. My father's hand wasn't the same color as his face. I lifted the portrait to try to get a closer look, but as I did so, it pulled on a string. Suddenly, a doorway opened, revealing stairs leading down. Curiosity got the better of me, and I went down the stairs. At the bottom of the stairs was a dungeon. As if that wasn't strange enough, in the dungeon were two people sitting huddled together in the corner. They hadn't noticed me at first, but as I stepped closer towards them, they looked up and cried out in joy.
Son!
It was my parents. But wait a minute, aren't my parents upstairs in bed? I began to feel really uncertain. Why did you call me son?
Because we are your real parents.
I had no idea if they were telling the truth or not, but something made me want to trust them. Come on, we'd better get you out of here. I helped break them free from their restraints, and we began to climb the stairs. As we went, my parents, my real parents, told me exactly what had been going on.
Those people upstairs are actually criminals. They kidnapped us and locked us away in the dungeon.
But they look just like you.
That's because they've been using masks to try to look like us. They're using us for our money. The only reason they kept us alive was because they needed us to get access to our wealth.
I was really shocked at what they told me.
We're so surprised that you're still here, though. We thought they might have kidnapped you, or even worse.
I told them how I had woken up on an island with no memory at all. I didn't know how I got there.
It seems to me like they probably did try to kidnap or get rid of you, but somehow you ended up in the ocean and washed up on shore.
We reached the top of the stairs and emerged from the doorway. Suddenly, I stopped dead in my tracks. My other parents were standing there. As soon as they saw us, my father pounced on my real dad and my mother jumped on my real mom. They started pounding each other with their fists, punches being thrown left, right, and center. At one point, one of my dads threw the other one against the wall and he slumped down in a heap. But just when I thought that was it, he jumped up from the floor and lunged at the other dad, knocking him to the floor. Both my moms had hold of each other's hair. They were pulling it and scratching at each other's faces. In the commotion, I couldn't tell who was who. I decided there was only one thing I could do. I grabbed my phone and called the police. When they arrived, my parents were all still fighting. The police broke up the fight and the four of them stood staring at me. Please, whoever's my real parents, just tell me. But they all stepped forward. I looked from one couple to the other. I couldn't tell them apart. They were even wearing the same pajamas, all of them.
I'm your real mom. Don't listen to her. No, I am.
I didn't know who to believe. Tell me something only my real mom would know.
Like what?
I thought for a moment, then it suddenly hit me like a flash. Tell me what kind of necklace my mom has.
It's a pendant in the shape of a bird.
I looked at her. You are right. You're my real mom. I turned to the police. These two are my real parents. The other two are the criminals. The police put handcuffs on my fake parents and began to lead them away.
We're your real parents, not them. You have to believe us.
I ignored their words. I knew who my real parents were. I hugged my mom and my dad. After that, things went back to normal in our house. The parties all stopped and no more celebrities came to visit. I was relieved that things had all worked out in the end. Finally, I felt that I was where I belonged. But just when I thought that everything was fine, something really strange happened. I was fast asleep in bed one night when a weird noise woke me up. When I opened my eyes, I saw that my dad was standing over me. He had a really odd look on his face. As I looked at him, I let out a whimper. My dad's face was peeling away, revealing a stranger's face underneath. Ah! 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 Ah!